Anuji, please give me the pointer. Okay, so I'm really grateful to the organizing committee here, Professor Chanchal, Ayush, and other members who have given me this opportunity to interact with all of you on this specific topic, which is of my, you can say, close to my heart. Interdisciplinary research in corporate law and taxation, expanding horizons. I have chosen this title for my presentation today. Why I have chosen it very soon, in next 40-45 minutes, you'll come to know. Because my understanding of research is little distinct from the general understanding of research. Person sitting next to me, Professor Chanchal, would be more interested in philosophical discussion and a kind of theorizing things. My approach, and let me tell you very, with a very, pleasant way that me and Chanchal both have been together from graduation itself. And in last around 20 years experience.
One intervention. Professor Girjesh has been a rolling stone. He stopped only here when we again met.
And the idea why it is very close to my heart, this topic, particularly the interdisciplinary approach, because I have been myself a disciple of this area, thanks to my supervisor, thanks to the professors at Delhi University, where I have learned this skill in conducting, doing, executing the research in interdisciplinary fields, in interdisciplines as such. Not to speak further regarding that aspect, let me just introduce this idea of interdisciplinary research. As I have just designed this whole presentation in a three, you can say, part. In the first part, I'll discuss what is the concept of interdisciplinary research as such, how it is different from disciplinary research, one single discipline research, and multidisciplinary research, number one. So that will be the first part I'll be discussing a little bit, because I assume that most of you would be already aware of this concept. In the next stage, I'll discuss through some examples the areas where interdisciplinary research has been executed in the past, and especially in context of researches in India. So that aspect I'll discuss. And then at the end of this discussion, I'll also bring the corporate and tax law issues in the research context. And then we'll try to understand that how it could be helpful for all of us, whether we are in phase of pursuing PhD, or we are in academics and we are doing day-to-day researches as such, even the class discussion also. Okay, so that's how I have prepared my presentation for today. Now, what's the purpose of research? Just a brief summary. I hope that it's a early morning, so I hope that each one of you would be comfortable with these early presentations also. What's the purpose of research? It's a kind of exploration, explanation, and description. That is the three words which describes research per se. You explore a particular problem. Once you study that problem, once you analyze that problem, once you understand that problem, you have a tendency to explain it. Because explanation is one very important part of research as such. So when Dr. Ayush done the research on juvenile, he tried to understand that And after understanding it, he has explained all of us on many occasions, keep us boring in our offices, coming every day with enthusiasm and explaining us, sir, this is my finding, this is my finding, this is what I have explained. So that's a human habit to explain those concepts and then describe it in more scientific manner. I've used the word scientific here because as a researcher, your job is not only to explain it in a layman's sense, but also to describe in a more scientific fashion. Any research, whether you are doing PhD or an academic writing an academic paper, ultimately should end up in a scientific explanation thereof so that you can theorize it. Without having that aspect, you can't do that. Coming to the concept of interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary, a brief kind of this pictorial presentation would be sufficient to explain you. Usually, I would be wrong if I say that these days people do research only in single discipline. I may be a little wrong here, maybe not that correct. Because these days, everybody, whenever they enter into any sort of research, you enter into a research relating to criminal law, you enter into research relating to the family law, or you even engage into research in sciences, be it natural sciences, humanities, or elsewhere. You will always get some degree of your understanding with other disciplines. You will necessarily engage into that. I want to learn why criminality, especially in the bordering area of Delhi, is growing. I would necessarily look into criminal law, but at the same point of time, I would like to see the immigration aspect, the migration aspect, the kind of economic developmental activities which are going on. And at this juncture itself, if I just bring your attention to the concept of growing juvenile crime, I may be wrong in using that word, Ayush may be correct, maybe correcting me here. But if you see the juvenile delinquency in and around the Delhi NCR, it's not merely a problem of growing child psychology or growing law and order problem. It has a lot of economic aspect also. It's a lot of momental aspect also when people are moving from one to other place. So a lot of issues are there. So when you engage into and having a lot of kind of things into your study, it is more or less a kind of multidisciplinary study, not interdisciplinary. Interdisciplinary study is when you try to integrate more than two disciplines into one. When you try to integrate two disciplines into one. And what could be best example for that? To my understanding, a best example of multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary study is, if I take example from your kitchen, when you prepare any dish, say example, you are preparing, say, a table pulao. It will have a veg, lot of veg things inside, green veg and all, rice, will have all other sort of things. But ultimately, when it will be cooked up, it will have a complete different flavor. Complete integration. But when you prepare salad, will it give you a different flavor? Whether tomato would look like a carrot? No. Each one of them have their own identity. That's a big difference which often we forget when we explain the concept of interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary. In multidisciplinary, the kind of ideas which you take to explain your concepts, your understanding about a given problem, you keep those concepts, those ideas completely intact. You merely borrow them to explain your point. But in interdisciplinary study, you integrate them and try to resolve it in some new fashion, try to theorize, and even at a given point of time, you try to give a new science. A best example would be when you merge the biology and technology into one, you come up with biotechnology. It's altogether a new science. When you merge the kind of psychology with criminal law, so criminal psychology is new growing science these days. In humanities also, when you merge the public political science and public administration into one, the administrative part into one, you bring a new subject called public administration altogether, a separate concept, separate discipline, isn't it? So that is something which is interesting here to understand that even at the early age, when I was of the opinion that there's hardly any difference between interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary, they're almost same, but that's not the correct way. So one point which is required here, a clarification, is that when you approach with any sort of such understanding of interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary, that approach should be very clear that what you are at the end going to do. Are you merely going to explain your concept from borrowing certain idea with different discipline, or you are going to integrate that discipline? I'll later on in my discussion, I'll bring some sort of examples where the integration aspect I'll explain through my own examples where I have studied as such. Proceeding further, just to briefing it out, why to enter into interdisciplinary study as such? Why not a single discipline sufficient to explain the human quest for knowledge? Every human being has a very important thing as a quest for knowledge. They want to generate knowledge. They want to expand the horizons of their knowledge. So why the single discipline was considered to be, which was highly to consider to be a very important aspect, why suddenly it has just been given a kind of sideline, you can say, in a one sense, and it has engaged into a lot of different disciplines. The reason is basically the modern day's challenges. Modern day's challenges, whatever problem we face today, the answer to those problems is not conveniently, if I would say, available in any single discipline. You all know how, since most of you from the legal background, law field, you all know how the even not only policy makers, legislatures, but also the judges feel that certain issues of criminal law, certain issues of legal problems are not going to be addressed merely by writing a judgment or giving punishment or providing some sort of guidelines. They require a lot of multi-pronged strategy, which includes not only a sort of rehabilitation, sort of training, sort of other kind of actions and activity which are required. So, since modern day problems are actually multi-pronged, actually very much complex, we need to have an interdisciplinary study. If I quickly bring a point here, that today if I want to understand about tax evasion and tax avoidance, can we explain the tax evasion and tax avoidance without understanding the globalization process? When majority of your companies have a global presence, when majority of the corporate sector have a global linkage, can you think of tax evasion in the same way as we were thinking in somewhere 1980s? Completely closed economy, completely controlled economy, some sort of license Raj. It was easy to understand from one single point of view what is tax evasion and tax avoidance. But now it is not that possible. A 10 by 10 room company sitting in some tax heaven is pumping $400 billion in one of the Indian company, and suddenly the market price of that company going sky high. How would you explain this process? Can you explain this process in simple terms of economics and economics of investment? You can't. Until you understand the concept of tax havens, until you understand and know the concept of shell companies, offshore companies, and how the globalization process has integrated into one, creating another new sort of, you can say, a kind of entity, creating another problem. So, yeah, obviously cyberspace and then jurisdictional issues. So point is that modern days problems themselves are very complicated. Modern day problems are themselves very complicated. If I may be a little carried away here, but if a tender is kid today, do some wrong, we can't simply blame the parenting. I'm sorry, but there are a lot of other issues over which even parents may not have a control. Lot of issues are there. So I'll not go into those detail. Hopefully some other speaker will speak on those issues. But modern day problems themselves are so much complicated. They're not that straightway problem as earlier used to be. Second one, today's graduate, I have written a very specific line here. Today's graduate will not be entering into career that's let's a lifetime, but lifetime of multiple career. I just quoted it looking into the experience of my own colleagues here. Modern day skill, because we all are teacher here, or supposed to be tomorrow's teacher. Modern day student sitting in the classroom is not expecting one shot of career. At the same point of time, they are expecting a lot of different type of skill development. If that is the expectation, the study and the kind of advancement in their skill is also required to be a different type. If I am teaching, say, tax law in my classroom, am I supposed to teach tax law in the same way as I could have taught this to a tax lawyer? Because half of my classroom sitting in the room number C8 is expecting to join a corporate sector where they will not go for litigation. They will be simply preparing files. Some of them would be simply joining NGOs. Some of them simply going to be tomorrow's judge who are least bothered about what tax is, because in their competitive service is not going to be asked. So I need to be a multi-prong in my strategy when I teach tax in my class. Same is true for most of the academicians who are entering these days class, because to whomsoever they are teaching, to whomsoever they are training, they do not have a one focus strategy in their own life. So they expect us to be very much different in that sense. And that's why interdisciplinary study becomes very, very important. I take this as an example. One day I was teaching in my class and somebody asked, "Sir, why are you focusing on international tax?" I said, "Beta, had it been a case that you joined my class in 1990, I would have not. I might have missed. But whichever firm you are going to join today, the first and foremost question they will say that we are multinational firm. One of our office is going to be in Paris soon. Do you have any understanding of that? International taxation." That's why these points become so much important, isn't it? At the same point of time, they may be tomorrow's policy maker. So they should know what are the functionalities of the taxation system as such. So a lot of these points are there. That's why I believe that interdisciplinary study is more and more important today. And again, I'm using the word interdisciplinary, not multidisciplinary. Because multidisciplinary is always there. Right from Darwin to all people, they have always studied in a multidisciplinary fashion. Integration is the latest kind of thing which is required to be discussed here. Now, I have just put up some point here with respect to why interdisciplinary study matters. I have just in this second para, the third para, I have just pointed out the 6 reasons of interdisciplinary study, why they does matter. Today, the complexity of nature, society, and ourselves, the complexity of globalized workplace, the need for system thinking and contextual thinking. System thinking and contextual thinking. You all know Professor Chanchal used to use a very interesting word. Text and context are always different. You have to integrate the text into context. Especially if you are teaching any law which has a bare act. This is very, very relevant. This is very, very relevant. The public world and its pressing needs, a knowledge society's need for both disciplinary and interdisciplinarity as such. Now, I'll take one by one few of things to explain these aspects. Complexity of nature, society, and ourselves. You all are law student, law scholar, or maybe some of you maybe from the humanities as well. I have not interacted as such in detail, but let me just give you my own experience. There are 5 types of capital, which in any society is required to be examined very closely with respect to any decision making. Mark my word. 5 types of capital. The natural capital, what we call nature's capital, the people's capital, the societal capital, the economic and financial. These are the 5 capital. I will start with an example. If today a factory is required to be established in and around Shimla, which capital is required to be examined first and foremost to give the permission? The natural capital. If it is going to be established in somewhere Ranchi, people would bother for natural capital, but at the last stage, not at the very first stage. If it is going to be established somewhere in near around Bhopal, again they would think of natural capital and people's capital. And if it is going to be established somewhere near around Ayodhya, the societal capital will come first. There are certain thought process which will prevail in decision making, keeping in mind these 5 capitals. Unfortunately, in India especially, or in developing country, my experience suggests me that here the economic and financial capital, the raw material and finances involved, are only capitals which are considered, and that's why we are facing biggest challenge in today's world is the environmental crisis and sustainable development, because first 3 capitals we have never looked into. And probably reason is, I connect the reason is because these capitals have never ever been part of our integrated study in any discipline. Even during my schooling, I remember biodiversity was not a word to be discussed. Gender was least discussed as such. And now when we talk about ESG, environmental, social and governance in business decision making, in investment banking as such, or providing financial to the companies as such, the ESG aspect become more relevant than any other. Why suddenly this become relevant? Because we have started integrating these 5 capitals into one to decide about. I don't know how many of you are aware that in January 2023, the United States Biden government has started preparing a data, a 15 years total task force. They have created 27 committees, 27 working group are now on that in that task force, who will create a database for calculating the natural capital of United States to think about and compare it with the GDP of United States. And the idea is basically very simple. In GDP only you calculate the economic and financial capital, not the natural capital loss, not the societal capital loss, and not even the people's capital loss. When a factory is established somewhere and environmental loss is there, have you ever seen in any balance sheet the loss of that environmental capital is discussed? Not even a part of balance sheet. Anybody sitting here in the of the field of economics or accounting as such would be knowing that in any company's balance sheet, the loss to the capital is always there except the natural loss, societal loss or the people's loss. They are not part of that. Even in the government's planning, even our finance minister every year annually put up the GDP, but there is no discussion, there is no column in that GDP about the nature's capital loss. How much natural resources you have wasted and how much it is left and how much is available for future generation. There is no data on that.
The social cost of production.
Social cost of production is there, but nature's loss, capital loss is a very interesting aspect. You claim, if it is a company, you claim depreciation every year. But where is the nature's capital loss? Where is that calculation? And how that calculation is going to be adjusted with, or how it is going to be marked with respect to the rupee value or dollar value. Because ultimately you can calculate only when you have the calculation with respect to these kind of, adjustments. So point is that since interdisciplinary studies have not been focusing into these aspects, we have been looking into the only one aspect, finance aspect or the economic aspect as such, not the human loss aspect as such or the societal loss aspect as such. For example, had it been a kind of understanding in 1950, probably we would have a better representation of women in the corporate sector. Because we never consider that loss of or not allowing women to come into the corporate sector is an actual loss. We have never thought of that. And that's why we kept segregating them continuously. Even today, in corporate board, in boards which makes the decisions, hardly you will find women representation even after having a clear-cut indication in this regard. If you read the SEBI LODR 2015 or especially LODR listing obligation and disclosure requirement regulation 2015, there is a specific requirement that a woman must be as an independent member in the board. Most of the time, these women are those independent members who have been earlier in some other subsidiaries. That is another point. I will not go again into that discussion. But my point is that this is a societal loss, isn't it? Women as a part of society is to be considered as a capital. Now, when you release 50% women workforce into the corporate sector, you have a better outcome there. A gender perspective, that's why a gender perspective in the corporate decision making is taken seriously these days, because this requires that. The complexity of globalized workplace, I'll not explain much about that. We have just discussed how cyberspace, how taxation, how the international trade has made impact on all these decision making, and hence obviously interdisciplinary study would be required in that field also. Changing the nature of approach as such, when we talk about especially study at university level also, there is a change in the approach. I'll put this through an example. Before 2008, in all law schools, language was not taken as a mandatory field. Only one English language was introduced, that you have to legal language you have to study, not beyond that. Now, even Bar Council says not only English is mandatory, apart from that, you will at least opt 2 more foreign languages. So whether you do it from SWAYAM portal or you just hire a teacher to teach German, French, or whichever language you wishes. Why this? Have you ever thought about why these languages have been introduced in BCI's curriculum, especially of 2010 CDC report? The reason is the globalized world requires this change in the university curriculum system. Only then true integration will be there. If a law school pass out goes outside and have say example, another foreign language skill, French or German, you would be more successful, you would be more integrative in those globalized world as compared to a person having one single language experience as such, isn't it? So these are the new problems which are coming. And we have to address it in a more integrated manner as what the actual purpose of interdisciplinary study is. Coming back to the criminal law example, because that is one example which often attracts us more. I remember when in 2007, I registered myself as a PhD scholar in Delhi University in the field of hate crime. I still remember that interview in which the 2 professors, very honorable professor sitting there, asked me a question, what is hate crime? Does it mean hate the crime? I said, no, not at all, sir. Hate crime means a bias crime, a kind of crime which you commit out of prejudice. I mean to say that in 2007 and 8, I was really struggling to explain people that there is some concept called hate crime. Only in US, the word bias crime was very popular and a lot of texts were available at that point of time in United States. And I still remember, I'll not name, in one of the interview, assistant professor's interview, I appeared, and then a Delhi High Court judge was sitting in that board, and when I presented my thesis, he said, no, there's nothing like hate crime, don't talk about it. And after 6 years, he wrote a judgment on hate crime when he reaches to Supreme Court. That is the integration I have felt in my own life. That when you integrate the law into the other fields, then only you realize the value thereof. Then only you realize the complex problem you face these days. I will be quick to explain this point with another example. Till 90s, most of the riots were explained in terms of religion only, or caste violence, or ethnic violence only. I mean to say one specific characteristics of a given violence, and that is explained. Nothing beyond that. After 90s, a lot of papers were published in EPW, wherein these violence were explained from the point of 2 specific understanding. One, the psychology of group And the second one, the economic aspect. Most of the Mumbai riots, which was initially against South Indians, and later on it was against the North Indians, but typical native versus. Initially, it was. I don't know how many of you are aware that initially the Shiv Sena, when it was initially formed, it was having an agenda against the typical, South Indian merchants and laborers and businessmen who were dominating the Mumbai as such. And if you watch there's an interesting movie called in Hindi it is there. It's a dubbed one. Ek ruka hua faisla. There is a dialogue into that. One Marathi, member of the jury shouts that in one single minute I can throw all of you from Maharashtra. I was just looking why he's making that a statement. During my PhD, I realized, because earlier I was not even aware, during my PhD only I read the text and I came to know that actually this whole scenario, the whole divide started somewhere in 1960s when the certain group of, South people dominating into the business and, labor market as such in Mumbai. Point is, now that has been replaced by North Indians, UP and Bihar and Madhya Pradesh. So now the consequential violence is against them. Same is true with the Assam violence which happened in Assam. When the migrant Bihari laborers, violence was there. It was again not a kind of religious or ethnic. It was more into the economic. The kind of occupying the labor market, occupying the employment space, and so on and so forth. Now, my point is, you can't understand the criminal law and criminal psychology unless you integrate it with other field of disciplines like economics, as I have understood here. One example I have cited here that in fact in United States, the crime before 9/11, a lot of scholars agree to this point. Before 9/11, crime was only explained in terms of crime chronology, victimology, and psychology. Only after 9/11 they realized that it has to go beyond, and they started adding on religion and culture into that, race into that. So racial explanation of crime, religious explanation of crime, and even a cultural contrast or cultural conflicts into crime has been explained. So these are the integration whereby we are, coming across some new sort of theories which try to explain the concept of crime as such. Obviously, since we are making an integration, it will surely help us to understand the problem and the context in which the problem is there. So how interdisciplinary work help us? First, by placing complex issue into a broad context. If you are making a study, say, in one single discipline, it will not raise that issue in a broad context, it will have a limited context. So interdisciplinaries, what they raise additional question that often challenge societal value. Whatever societal value you have, that will often challenge if you do an interdisciplinary study into that. For example, addressing environmental sustainability raises question about human freedom and responsibility and proper role of public and private sector. So it's an example of how law and other things could be taken into consideration from the environmental aspect. Let me put up another aspect, the concept of the kind of broad context. If I ask you to raise your hand, I'll not ask. I'm just making a statement. If I ask you to raise your hand as to how many of you feel that if a woman judge is going to be there on the bench, she would be more sympathetic to the victims than a male judge. I hope most of you would be very, very keen to answer that women judge would be more sympathetic. And I wish not to dishearten you, but in 2015-16, I conducted a research in UP as to one single question. How the trial judges take the issue of compensation seriously. Supreme Court says, no, anybody, all those who are from humanities, I just explain a point before explaining this example. Under the criminal law, accused tried for committing an offense, If he is convicted, he will go to jail. He or she will go to jail. What will happen to victim? So a different kind of, you can say, theory started and practice also, that victim will be given compensation, rehabilitation, and so on and so forth. Victim will be given compensation. From whose pocket? So it was initially thought that whatever fine you will impose on the accused, on the convict rather I would say, that fine will be given to the victim for his or her rehabilitation as a compensation, as an assistance, whatever you call it. So I was in my mind that all the judges are again and again saying that there should be a greater compensation given to victims and all. So I thought to just do a empirical work, because I have that tendency. I don't know, since last 10-15 years I've started more thinking in terms of economics and statistics as such. So I collected data from all 71 session courts of UP, a sample size of minimum 100 cases from each session court. A total of 2,776 cases were analyzed. The basic principle was that all cases would be simply those in which punishment is already there by a session judge, not the magistrate court, session court. Number two, punishment must be an imprisonment of not less than 3 years. So meaning thereby serious cases. A lot of categories are there, I will not explain those points. My limited question was, how the compensation were given, how much compensation were given, and is there any difference between giving compensation, the attitudinal difference between male and female judges, or attitudinal difference between judges while the victim is male or female? These were the two questions, apart from many other questions which I have asked. Before this research, even I was of the opinion that probably women judges would be more sympathetic and more cautious in giving the judgment in terms of compensation. My research data says otherwise. My research data says otherwise. There is no gap, there is no significant relationship between gender and the question of compensation. So whether you are a male victim or female victim, whether you are a male judge or a female judge, it doesn't matter in terms of giving compensation. Which means that probably the question of compensation is not so linked with gender, it is linked with something different idea. And what different idea could be? If I put it otherwise in a different context, in my research, in that year 2015-16, all 71 session court in my sample size have imposed and fetched a fine of rupees around 9.5 crore. And out of that 9.5 crore, only 1.2 crore were given as a compensation, which means you have a profit of almost 8 crore by running criminal justice system, which is better than any liquor business. You can give this complex kind of, you can see this complex kind of problem only when you have this kind of integrated study where you have using the statistics into the data which is available on hand, you can say. If the Supreme Court judges again and again saying, keep on giving compensation, give maximum compensation. So theoretically it looks like that what a wonderful idea, what a wonderful criminal justice system we have where every victim is compensated. But when you look into the data, when you integrate it, then you realize that there is another problem here. Even after this much sermon from the High Court or Supreme Court, yet the trial judges are not giving it. There could be many more problems of that. I have raised many other questions, but there could be many more. Now this is only, this could be only learned and understood only when you integrate these interdisciplines. Had it been a case of merely compensation, whether compensation is given or not, I could have simply draw a line, yes, every judge is giving compensation. Every judge is giving a compensation. So that's why interdisciplinary studies actually must for today's world. Again, for all those students who are here as a learner of law, who are from the legal background as such, you would be surprised to know, if not otherwise already aware, that in section 304B IPC there is no provision for fine. One can raise a question why every offense has a fine but not 304B. And one of the logic given by a professor to me was interesting. And the logic was Fine is imposed just to make sure that it is going to be paid to the victim. And who is the victim in case of 304B? Ceased disease now. Who will receive it? Since it's 7 years of marriage, so we will receive it. The parents cannot because they have already done Kanyadan. So if they already have done that, how come they can receive fine as a compensation from the pocket of somebody else through the... This is a very interesting psychological, patriarchal, sociological, from whichever point you wish to realize. This is what we call as, in a sense, integrated study, or a kind of a study where you have to understand the true essence of that science, that law. Moving further, interdisciplinarity as such offers a process that enable you to effectively integrate knowledge drawn from relevant discipline and thus enable you to go deep into many disciplines as in necessary or appropriate to grasp the essentials of that problem. So when you do the interdisciplinary study, you face a bigger challenge as such, and you become in a position to actually explain it in a larger, in a more contextual manner than in a single discipline possible. Pursuing interdisciplinary study empowers you in 3 ways. It empowers you to deal with complex social problems, as I have just explained, be it environmental, be it neuroscience, be it biotechnology, be it these days law and psychology, law and sociology. I have heard only, out of context I'm quoting, I've heard only that one of the best judge in Supreme Court was Justice Krishna Iyer and Bhagwati. Interestingly, most interestingly, both had a sociology in their post-graduation. And even Professor Bakshi, the living legend who would be addressing you very soon in this CVP, he was also, his basic discipline at initial level was sociology and not the law. And that's how he was able to explain all these points. In fact, Justice Krishna Iyer, he was coming from diverse field before coming to the justice. He was a legislature. He was in a sense politician. So he was probably having a first-hand experience of all these things. That's why he was in position to understand the true nuances of legal system and legal setup. If you are integrating all these things, there is a possibility that you will be enabled to effectively translate your education into new context.
So he was also a prisoner.
Yeah.
He was also imprisoned.
Yeah. I mean, that is the reason. See, my point was basically to explain you that today, if I means anybody who has integrated the law and things or different subject into that field, he or she would be in a better position to explain you those contexts. If you ask me, I was a student of Professor Ved Kumari in Delhi University. I was a student of Professor Ved Kumari. When she speaks, you will listen altogether a new sense of law. I first time heard from her mouth, law, LAW. It stands for Law Against Women. So very basic abbreviation of the law is itself Law Against Women. First time shocked to see that. And obviously this could be one perspective, but as a male student of that class, you now have the other side of this story. You have now the other side of the story. From our mouth only, I can give you some of the examples. So women is a Graha Lakshmi, but will not be having share in the property. A typical, you can say, critical part of feminism which I learned at that point of time, I realized that these are the things which should have been debated, and probably she was in position to debate it because she has integrated juvenile, women and law into one sector, one particular field. So that is another, you can say integration enables you that way. Today also if I speak about, integration in a skill development as such, I should not be self-obsessed with, but I'll give one example again of myself. I am DSW, at the same point of time a teacher of tax law, at the same point of time chairman purchase committee. The worst impact of my subject is on purchase committee. The worst impact of my this teaching tax law is on purchase committee, because now there are two things which is really interesting. First, that none of the purchase committee members sign unless I sign. They say once Shukla has signed, it is assumed to be correct, let's sign. And if I have not signed, they will wait for this. Wait till end. Usko pehle sign karne do. Once they will sign things, because they believe that this fellow have an understanding of law apart from the taxation, apart from the general, these kind of trading aspect, would be in a better position to understand it, and then you can just go ahead with that. This integration is helping you. This is a skill development. Other than one point of example I'll miss if I'll not quote here. In 2010, the then Chief Justice Ganguly was there, and he made a statement publicly in ILI where I was attending a meeting. I and Chanchal both were a member of a research committee, Supreme Court restatement on public interest litigation. There was a committee in which we and Chanchal both were the member. And a document was released there. Justice Ganguly at that point of time said that I hardly have a brother judge, who is accustomed with or acquainted with the tax issues and corporate issues, with whom I may be comfortable to give the judgment. And reason is because the whole bunch of lawyers who are coming, or judges who are coming either as a promoting judge from the High Court or the direct entry from the bar, none of them have, or majority of them do not have the exposure into these fields. So that's why even in tax matter and corporate matter, our hands are tied. Many a time it takes longer time than as compared to the civil, criminal and family matters. We can dispose of these matters quickly because we have a good understanding of that. And it is a nice confession from none other than Chief Justice. Reason again, because of these kind of things. Obviously, integration also enable you to think and effectively on complex problem without getting overwhelmed or cowed by disciplinary experts or resorting to digging into your own heel. That is another aspect. Integration help you to answer those queries in one hand or with one perspective, with given perspective as such, without unnecessarily being crowded of lot of opinions and things. Because if you know the integration, you would be in a better position to understand the complex things. At this juncture, I'll give you one, again, a very short story. It is written by some European professor. I don't have that much, memory power to name that professor, but he has written in his book a very interesting story. Story says something like that. A house was required to be built for an elephant. 4 or 5 member committee was constituted, in which engineer was there, logically. An architect was there, obviously. A sociologist, a psychologist, an economist. 3 more were there. Apart from that, but that elephant was obviously not there in that committee, for whom that house was required to be made. It's a beautiful story, suggests how many times, even if you are crowded with information, you will fail. Even if you are crowded with information, you will fail. So, house was required to be constructed. Economists say, look at, this is my plan, this much rupee I have, please construct the house. The engineer says, yeah, I'll do that, this much money is sufficient. We can.
Professor Andrea Bianchi's book, sir.
Andrea
Bianchi.
Okay, thank you for providing this information. So, that fellow has say, okay, I'll do that. I'll construct that house with this money. No issue, not a problem at all. Architect says, let me have a good understanding of how to construct it. Let me tell you something. It's an elephant. So obviously the wall should be little stronger. And rather more stronger, because the elephants have a habit of leaning on the side, on any side. And probably they will lean on the wall side and it may collapse. So we need to have a very strong wall. Immediately the sociologists jump into and say, look at one more thing I have observed. the sociology of elephants, they often make standing. So the roof should be little higher. Height of roof should be very high as such. Increased height should be there. But okay, fine. Psychologist was also there. Is it for one single elephant or there would be a family? So they had no information about that. So they still find out a good space. He put another point, the psychologist put another point. Since as of now it is a single elephant, so he may be bored, he maybe have a psychological problem of living alone. So let's have some sort of wall painting, especially green painting, so that he can feel like living in jungle. The house was constructed. Cut the story short. The house was constructed and elephant came. Fortunately, unfortunately, this elephant was not from jungle, it was from a circus. He had no idea about greenery. Never liked that green things. He was not leaning on the side also, because he was scolded a lot while being in circus to lean, because in the circus, the all structures are usually temporary, and if you lean on that, even human being lean on that, they will collapse. So he was trained not to lean. So all money is spent having a heavy wall, but wasted. It was not required. His being alone was also not true. Very soon he got married with another elephant from the same circus. So both of them have no habit of doing all these things, and a high roof was also not required. So in fact, the whole structure which was prepared by these bunch of people was not suitable, and finally within 6 months they left the house. Both the elephant left the house. The moral of this story is, many a time, even if you are crowded with lot of knowledge, you will end up nowhere without having true integration to a given problem and understanding them from a given perspective. I still remember one of the class in my LLM time. In one lecture where I debated with Professor Ved Kumari, she said, at that point of time, I don't know if anyone is aware, School Chale Hum, there was an ad used to be, School Chale Hum. In that ad, there was an interesting instance. The father is leading his son and daughter to school on a bicycle. The son was in the front and daughter was sitting on the back seat. An explanation was something like that. Look at here, son is in front with 2 hands on both sides of the cycle, a complete protection and safety, care in front of the eyes. And where is the daughter? On the back side. This is absolutely negation of what we understand in true sense, equality and all. As a student, I was little curious, and I said, ma'am, what if I change the position? What if I ask the daughter to come in front and son on the back seat? Don't you think that there would be another argument that, look at here, the daughter is in control and son is completely enjoying the freedom? There could be a possibility. After the lecture, we agreed on one point that till time both are going to school, actually, sitting position will not have any much impact. The only thing is, which should be required in this case, that they must go to school, unlike at that point of time, many parents in Andhra and other regions selling their own daughter and son because of extreme poverty. This example I've just thrown here just to explain you the point of integration. Do we really understand the problem from a real perspective, complex perspective, or since we are crowded with a lot of information, we are jumping to some sort of conclusion without understanding the problem? That is another issue of why integrated study, or what we call interdisciplinary study, is necessary. Now, just to explanations about integrated study and all, I'm not very much interested, but I want to give you some data. This is a copy data from Business Today. You can see here the kind of information with respect to the top 10% share of income, the bottom 50%, how much they share the income, and top 1% share of income as such. The kind of income inequality which we have in our society, income inequality. The second data is regarding, these are the two headings which I have, but I'll discuss with integrated study as such from the corporate and tax and business perspective. India's employment problem and a bad statistics. There was a news in the Indian Express. Why migrant workers issue recur? The absence of data and coordination between the state. And the third information is most on death row are poor from backward caste group minorities. Law University report. This is a Project 39 report by University of New Delhi. These three information is throwing lot of ideas as to where went wrong. There could be lots such example. I have not collected all those examples here. There could be lots such example. My experience suggests that until we find out an integrated studies where we can question the policy from the different methodologies available in a given discipline, we would not be reaching to a given problem. We would not be. I'll put an example here again. I don't know how many of you are aware that per month we spend 6 lakh rupee on just purchasing water to run this university. Per month 6 lakh rupees. I'm only worried about what would be the lifespan of this university. Down the line, 20 years, this expenditure will run how much? I can't imagine at this stage. It means what? It means a given decision making must be required at this stage, especially in a stage where you are facing a lot of complex issues, is required lot of greater integrated understanding of the decision as such and its impact thereof. Look at three examples differently. Employment status, the migrant workers problem, or the death row issue. All the three belong to three different fields I have chosen. But just to throw a kind of discussion as to why at the time when you have a GDP of more than 7% and the 10 years GDP of around 8% average, yet you have this much severe problem. It means that somewhere they all have not went in the right direction. Even having 8% GDP or 7% GDP has not solved the problem of migrant worker, has not solved the problem of employment, has not even in somewhere you can say trickle down to the other field of human needs also. I have taken this particular page, I've given you this particular page with a very interesting information. The screenshot which simply suggests about UP government's very recent policy, this month announced policy. UP government this month has announced a policy that if you purchase agricultural tools, which includes pumping set also, you will be given 50% subsidy. So you purchase a 5 lakh rupees pumping set or any drainage pipe and other things, you will get 50% subsidy. Even if you purchase tractor, seeder, these are the machines name. Tractor, 10 lakh rupee tractor, 5 lakh will be given by the government. Remaining will be given by the obviously the farmer, kind of DBT kind of scheme it is there. I wish to study this decision or this kind of governmental policy from a different integrated perspective. I don't know how many of you are aware that the water label, groundwater label in UP, especially in eastern UP, has gone 10 times low as compared to 1990. In 1990, water was available somewhere at a 20 or 40 to 60 feet. Nowadays, it is available not above the 200 feet. Sometimes it is 400 to 600. Still having this much low groundwater availability, if you are promoting or a decision comes from the government to promote the groundwater use, uncontrolled groundwater use, what will happen to the groundwater and water crisis in coming days? These decisions, since as I said, these decisions, if you look at from one single discipline, promoting agriculture, you would be more than happy. Wow, what a wonderful idea to promote the agriculture and farming and poor sections of society. But if you look it into its entirety, the sustainability, I mean, one more example. All of you are mature one, already having a lot of experience of life. These days, almost every government across the India, in fact, I believe, that they are promoting selling of subsidized tractors. When you have a 98% land as a critical land holding, which means less than 10 bigha as such, what this tractor will do? If you are purchasing a seeder machine for 4 lakh to 5 lakh rupees seeder machine to see for wheat seeding and all, a person having 4 to 5 bigha land would use seeder machine for the purpose of wheat growing? I doubt. What kind of tendency that it will have in future? Look at from the perspective of sociology. Look at from the perspective of agriculture and farming. Look at from the perspective of critical land holding, and look at from the perspective of the family system as well. Down the line, I tell you, down the line 10 years, the present day of critical land holding in UP will go down by more than 5%. Which means the person having holding a 5 bigha today will have hardly a bigha. And in that case, what the hell will happen to this tractor? Seeder. Probably this will enforce a new idea of lease farming, further exploitation, further seclusion and inequality. These are the complicated questions. That's why I thought to give you a detail of interdisciplinary study first, because these are the complicated questions which I believe, some of them obviously are taking it seriously, but I believe at a larger scale they are being either unattended, unaddressed, or even at the least I would say not much examined. I've just given this point to explain you that how even at this subsidy rate 80 crore, again there is a information I've quoted, 80 crore people of the country get a free ration. It's nothing but a kind of a confession on behalf of the society that the social inequality, the financial inequality is growing day by day. It is only probably because there is a lack of understanding as to the decision making and its impact on all. And because of that, probably the reason behind that is probably that there is no integrated study as such beyond just what I earlier used the word crowded information. So all these issues are there. Look at another decision. I don't know how many of you even think of that to somewhere guide your students, your peers to look into those studies. But these days, corridor-based road system has come into practice. So at one point of time, only Mumbai-Thane corridor was there. Then Mumbai-Goa corridor was there. Now we have a Delhi-Agra, then Agra-Lucknow corridor, now Lucknow to Varanasi corridor. If you see this corridor, I say, with most sincere attempt, I say they are the monumental example of social inequality, of financial inequality, or even exclusion. Had it been a normal road, anybody could have come there, have a small shop, maybe controlled by the municipalities and all. Have you ever seen these kind of development in Delhi-Agra corridor? Not possible even, because they are barricaded completely. Nobody can come inside unless. And just in this month, the central government, Ministry of NHI, in fact, they have issued a prospectus in which they have advertised 1,000 such corridors and space for corporate sector. And initial investment is up to 1 crore. Minimum 1 crore. 1 to 10 crore investment is required. Which means what? That these corridors would be completely segregating a majority of population as such. Now, I'm not anti to that, I'm not pro to that. My question only that whether these decisions are not required to be examined with a integrated model where we can find out the complex problem of tomorrow's inequality whose base is built today. So these are the questions which is required to be understood in terms of modern day corporate setup, because all these corridors are built by the corporate sector. So if we examine corporate sector's performance in terms of building these roads from the perspective of only speed of the speed with which they construct these roads, then fine, they have been marvelous, wonderful in constructing these roads. But if we are not examining them from the inequality perspective, from social exclusion perspective, from excluding the small and medium farmers and businessmen perspective, then probably we are committing some sort of, I would say, mistake, if not blunder. So these are the, as an academician, as a scholar, as a researcher, as a learner, I feel that this is the time when we should take all these matters seriously. These are some burning crises every day coming into the newspaper, which we often overlook. So this is the one aspect which I have thought to explain to all of you. Last one news is also interesting. Behind the prejudice against a street vendor lies a flawed idea of public space. This, in fact, news cutting is from the Maharashtra, where after some stampede was there at the railway station, the government decided to remove all the street vendors from the railway station, as if that they were the reason behind the stampede as such. And in fact, the worst was, I don't know how many of you carried that news, worst was that proposal came from the railway department that heavy suitcase will not be allowed between the peak hours of the Mumbai train as such. So during peak hour, you can have just a small carry bag, not the briefcase. So these are the decisions which is somewhere required to be examined from academic perspective also. Last but not least, when you two have finished arguing your opinion, I actually have a data. There's a cartoon for all of you. It is just to suggest that opinions, data, integration is required for today's academic understanding. I'm done with this. If I think this is going to be a session open for any query, any question, any explanation if you require from me, I would be more than happy to take up those queries.
Thank you, sir. Taking host privilege, I would like to just make a certain comments, and also a problem of discipline and interdisciplinary integration. The very word discipline has a connection with Latin disciplinus, which means to train or to correct. These are one negative concept, other is a positive concept. The idea is that when we develop discipline, we try to train someone in that language, and also try to correct someone if that someone is going to deviate. But every discipline has certain semantic evasiveness, as you explained in your slide. So what is semantic evasiveness? Every discipline is composed of certain technical terms, and which is not accessible to the people, and that's why every discipline makes its own school of thought, and they don't want to meet each other. Now we have this congress where we have multiple disciplinary people, so we are trying to integrate with each other's. Another aspect is that every discipline has certain methods, certain principles, certain techniques through which that discipline is developed. But problem is when we are not trying to integrate techniques and principles with each other, so we cannot develop interdisciplinary approach. As you rightly suggested, that multidisciplinary is a different thing when we can read many things, but the very technique and the very principle and the very norm which are not we are able to share with each other, and that's why we are not able to understand each other, because deep understanding resolves the problem and you don't require any solution. But that's one thing. And second, sir has rightly pointed out about data. So data has somehow limited our approach to understand the problem. And whenever we find a problem, we try to search Google, we try to search data, and that provides a ready-made answer. Whenever we find ready-made answer, we lose the capacity of thinking. We lose the capacity of reflecting on that problem. These are the challenges that I think we are facing.
In fact, one more illustration which I missed during my presentation, again it's from criminal law interestingly. You will be surprised to know that in my very short research, making a comparative study of bail law, I mean, it was shocking for me. Usually bail, when you apply for bail, people from legal background would understand it more appropriately, probably more widely. If you apply bail, you need to supply surety and a security, a bond kind of things. I made a comparative study between Barabanki district of UP, around 50 bail order, and a similar 50 bail order of Delhi as such. I have chosen extreme, you can say rural type of belt and to extreme other side of belt. In my report and my short pilot work, I have seen that how the bond amount is so arbitrarily fixed. So in my report, I saw that on an average, bail bond for a murder case, murder accused, is 50,000. And on an average, bail bond, if you steal a bag from railway station, is also 50,000. 3 cases, which was most interesting for me, intercaste marriage, allegation of intercaste marriage and related kidnapping was there, 50,000 rupees. So murder is equivalent to love affair. May be wrong in this conclusion, but as Dr. Mrityunjay has pointed out, sometimes data, just like looks, are deceptive also. I may be wrong in my conclusion because pilot study it was and a very short data was there. But this also very categorically suggests that the rationalization of bond is yet to be understood by the judges, especially when bail court is sitting and giving judgment on bail matter. Now here again, once you will integrate the statistical point of things, statistical methodology into the decision making of the judicial officer, you will realize and you will get lot of more information which could be a policy guideline for the future. So in that way, it's very important to integrate in fact. Yeah, please, it's open, the floor is open for any other question.
In fact, sir, one thing comes to my mind as you were discussing. The kind of bail trend that India is following, isn't it putting a price on freedom?
Yes, absolutely.
Ultimately?
The bond itself is considered to be, Professor Bakshi in his writing in 1980s has written it, that is a kind of price tag for your freedom. Yes, just use this word in fact. Yeah, this is very true. Yes.
So was there any difference between these two jurisdictions?
Yeah, big difference. As such, the amount which is there seems to be mechanical. The Delhi court is also giving less. In fact, Delhi court is giving lesser bail bond. Is asking lesser bail bond as compared to the Barabanki court. As a matter of fact, the purchasing power of that people is assumed to be higher as compared to Barabanki, and yet the distinction is otherwise. So these are some very complicated issues. Yes.
Thank you, Professor Shukla, for a very good lecture. And I would like to chip in with Professor Mrityunjay about the complexities of interdisciplinarity. Something came into my mind, I would like to share it with everybody. It's about the culture of neo-formalism, which is inherent in all disciplines. The idea of conservatism that is inherent in all disciplines. Like for example, we want an interdisciplinary studies wherein we want to criticize the mainstream from the critical perspective. There is a lot of new technique that has been developed by the mainstream of constantly othering the critical studies, even when they are accepting certain tenets of mainstream approaches. Like for example, there is a culture of engagement within the mainstream perspectives or the conservatives or the traditionalists, whereby they try to engage in some sort of semantics which has to be adopted by a critical engager or maybe maybe an interdisciplinary engagement which is being made with that particular approaches, unless and until you are in sync with that semantic language or the culture of engagement, you will always be considered as a periphery in the discipline.
Yes, very true, very true.
This is the problem. In fact, we have picked up certain issues on environment and feminism in this particular lecture. I would like to pinpoint certain certain problems inherent within feminism also. Like for example, the Charlesworth notion of feminism, of mainstream feminist approaches, whereby it is argued, like for example, they have constantly been arguing about equality of pay, equal work for women, or equal participation of women, but they engage to do it within the formalist or neoliberal setting of a corporate world.
Yes.
They don't try to engage with that basic framework of criticizing the exploitative tendencies of the corporate world and considering the element, totally ignoring the element of patriarchy and associate patriarchy only with men. So this kind of criticism is done by McKinnon, Nancy Fraser, and even some Indian writers, like for example Kaviraj, Chinni, or maybe Sudipta Mohanty. So they keep on engaging like that, and they are constantly made aware that they are peripheries. These are new sorts of neo-formalist understandings of refuting the culture of interdisciplinarity. One idea. The second, we were talking about ESG, environment, social governance. Or about, like for example, you've quoted about that American effort in 2022, which is actually followed by another effort by UNCTAD in June 2022 of commodifying natural resources across the world. It means you pay money and cut the trees. So this idea of posing, idea of bequeathing governmental or public responsibility to corporates in the name of environment, social and governance is entirely absurd. But this kind of argument being made is completely refuted by neo-formalist understanding with respect to culture of engagement. That you don't speak my language, you are always in the periphery. To find an entry in my discipline, you need to talk my language.
Language, very true. In fact, even in a legal field also, not only in a feminist ideology or feminist culture or even a corporate culture, even in a legal field you will find out that the same kind of attitude has been since, I would say, ages. Only very recently this kind of debate has entering into the other domains. Otherwise, you all know how this kind of discussion was earlier. All those people who will talk about law and legal science were only from a given specific branch, and all others were not only on the periphery. I would say they were outsiders. They were considered to be an outsider. That is true. Very true. Very true. It is. But one point which I will try to again explain, that the Americans, which they started, calculating the natural GDP, what they call basically nature capital calculation, it has at least started a new debate as to what you have used the appropriate word, bequeathing. At least this will raise the debate. Otherwise, this has been done till date silently. For example, if tomorrow the coal mines of Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh, or the other mines and minerals of Jharkhand is given as such on the what we call as a lease, the people will never come to know that who were the trustee of this lease and who should have been given the benefit thereof. That's an interesting point. All those people who are minting money from these natural capital are the beneficiary, and their tax is invested elsewhere than the people who should have been the first property holder of that natural asset. So these are the some debate, at least, even if in a wrong way, even if it has come in a negative fashion, at least will open the platform for information to all. That's why, in fact, it is also very interesting. Though the Americans have started doing it, they have set and made a plan of 15 years. I was worried about when I read the report. It's a PDF document. When I read the report, I was realizing would they take 15 years to calculate $1 to that of a natural asset? What about other countries? If they are scientifically so advanced, technologically so advanced, financially also advanced, if they will take 15 years, think about India, how much time we will take. So this is also very interesting. I mean, these are things, sometimes I feel like I'm afraid, isn't it a kind of another drama by certain class of people in America to do it just to bypass others? Just to, you can say, what we usually say, buying time.
So there was a critical piece on that exactly on your idea that why are they taking so much time in mapping these natural resources?
Yes.
There was one critical writer who wrote on this particular element and said that 1 year they will take to they will at least take 1 year only to map the entire natural resources and 19 years for people to internalize the details.
Yes. That is these, but these things are interesting. These things are interesting. I'm just imagining a time frame that when Indian states will start doing this. Having this high inequality, that is, nobody can just keep the eye closed and say these things are not in and around us. These things are there. We have to open our eyes and realize it. Whether to find an answer or not is a different question. One of my fellow has been a wonderful, not only a friend, but a very good researcher. He has made a very interesting point that researches are basically a relay race. You carry battle and then you transfer it to somebody else. So I feel that in that way, the studies which we are pursuing, or we are supposed to do, we should keep that tendency in our mind, because the realities of life, realities of societies cannot be ignored for whatever reason, cannot be ignored. I belong to a very simple village, and I have seen how that has changed since 90s, by time when I just realized that, okay, these things are going on. These things are required to be taken care by academicians. We are in that field, we have to take it care. I mean, we have to take care of that. Any other question? I would be more than happy to take up.
So if I'm permitted, one more.
Sure, please.
Okay. So this regarding the relay argument you have made, sir. Another thing pops into my mind is Kantian epistemology, where he says that we all are lucky enough. Every generation is luckier than the past, that it has born with the wealth of enlightened knowledge, and that carries on. But the problem is that when you keep othering the critical perspectives, it gets ignored even more in the upcoming generations. That's the problem. So hard work needs to be done with respect to semantics only.
Yes.
So literary criticism works a lot. I mean, the reading which we were given by Professor Upendra Bakshi speaks a lot on this. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes.
And I perhaps there is a new emergence of science, cybernetics, and gestalt therapy of psychology, which are going beyond semantics and trying to understand mind and body relationship in more holistic sense.
Yeah.
And I remember Dalai Lama once convened a very good conference with artists and spiritual thinkers and scientists to deliberate on the question of life. And such kind of conferences are required to promote this interdisciplinary.
Very. In fact, a lot of people in our society, I feel like, were left out in the main discourse. It has been just given to certain class or categories who are having access to these kind of debates. That's true.
Sir, a few words relating to the scope of research in the area of taxation.
Yeah.
The scope of research in the area of
These
taxation.
are the area, I mean, I have not dealt in detail, but these are the areas in taxation, for example. These are the areas. Can you imagine a area of taxation or area of a kind of liabilities or responsibilities in terms of in these days employment. If you get ill, I'm just giving another example of how interdisciplinary study and how these things are required. If you get ill, you will have a medical leave. But if your father or parents get ill, you don't. And if you require to take care of them off, you don't have much assistance from the system. And then suddenly you criticize everybody for sending your parents to old age home. I have no answer to these questions, but there is really required to have a greater understanding how the present day employment system is itself contributing into segregation of parents from their kids. Though you are paying 30% tax, you are coming into the 30% tax bracket with all these loopholes and burdens. So these are the studies which are required. I am not only speaking here about the tax rate and tax slab, but these are the critical question. One of the four functions of tax is, apart from the state function, is the paternalistic function. It's very much argued in tax laws that when the state collect tax, they perform paternalistic functions like serving you and your family carefully. But where is those arrangement apart from just giving certain small remedies along with the blame of segregation? So lot of issues are there. In fact, we can have interaction also on this issue later on or individually. That what are the gray areas of these things? Any other question? Okay, please.
Sir, I'm from social work, and I know if there is any legal take, because I have worked on legal system. So is there any legal take on the concept between land owning and land holding?
As such, in the land reform laws, if you refer the land reform laws, I'm not expert of that area. If you refer the land reform laws, there the land holding is most important, not land owning, because the state is supposed to own it. You have the land holder. I mean, in fact, if you read the UP Jamidari and Land Reform Act 1951 or 52, the category of land holders are defined. And in certain cases, if you transfer the holding, you will lose your ownership. That's a strange concept. For example, unless otherwise provided under the Land Reform Act itself, you can't lease your land. You can't lease your land. Or if you're not holding the land for 12 years, your ownership gone. These are the very some interesting concept of holding and ownership. So where is the ownership in a British, in a European sense? When we talk about ownership, means you have a right to use, enjoy, transfer, and destroy also. That's the kind of extreme concept I'll not look into. Ayush and Mrityunjay is there to look into. But this aspect is interesting, that you are the owner. Even if I assume that I'm owner of the land and I'm not tilling it for next 12 years, it's gone. It's no more my land. Or if I am not, if otherwise permitted, if I have just leased the land to somebody else, unless my age is 25 and I'm studying in some university, or I'm a woman who has no one to take care of that. Only in these two conditions, I believe there might be one more, I don't know. But these are the two specific conditions where you can transfer it on lease basis. In the rest of the cases, it will be deemed to be sold. It's strange. If you read the land law, UP land law, it will be deemed to be sold. That's interesting. So these are the some idea where you can mix these concepts as such. In fact, the whole, I sometimes look at it critically, the whole registration of land deed in the UP can be questioned from this perspective. That if you're not owner, how come you are registering it to somebody else?
Sir, because you don't actually own the land, you own the rights on that land.
True. So holder. So that is holder. You are a holder. You are a holder of that land.
You can enjoy the rights and you can possess the rights. You can do whatever you want with the land, but you don't actually own that piece of land.
Own that.
What I wanted to give the reference of whole basic thing. Trick was played on this category.
Who is the yes.
There is an interesting book by Ramajit Guha, A Rule of Property for Bengal. And that book explains the history of how land owning system changed from our system of.
In fact, his introduction to subaltern studies also talk about the same thing.
Yeah. So perhaps that would be a good approach to understand Lord Cornwallis' approach to permanent settlement and how it changed the land system in India.
Yes.
In fact, even before that, if you read the medieval history in this regard, especially the Irfan Habib, when he wrote about the medieval history and the land settlement, even there you will find that almost be it the Todermal plan or later on, they have been very clear that ownership is not there. It is settlement only. It is only the holding you will have. In fact, that has continued. That has continued. Anyway, a greater study would be required, so you can go ahead into that. Ma'am, I think you had a question.
Thank you, Professor, for the amazing session. And I have a small doubt regarding your observation about the bail security and bond.
Yeah.
And since the discretionary power is with the judiciary, the kind of imposing of the security is in the hands of the judge. And what I would like to know about your observation of the different approach from Delhi judiciary.
I'll say where went wrong.
My
Yeah.
question is to
Yeah, got a question. Where went wrong? See, ma'am, where went wrong?
Professor, can I be allowed to complete my question?
Sure, please.
Yeah. Whether it is because of the high crime rate in NCR or any other reason that you observe in your research, I would like to know about it.
Sure. It's not high crime rate. It's not my observation. It's not high crime rate. It is not any other factor except the mechanization of the judicial mind. They have a kind of Excel sheet in their brain where they have filled the data. It's a murder case, 50,000. It's a dacoity case, 40,000. Idea was, if you read into, the idea was that this bail bond should be in connection with the gravity of crime, the possibility of this fellow running away from jurisdiction to prohibit that possibility, to plug those possibilities, and the ability of that fellow to do any other illegal act as such. Basic idea was that this bond will be confiscated if you will violate the conditions of the bond. That was the idea. Unfortunately, since long, the judicial mind here have been very casual. I'll give two examples before coming to the Barabanki and Delhi case. In Salman Khan case, when he has been prosecuted in Rajasthan, the bail amount was 17,000. Do you think Salman Khan will not breach the conditions just for sake of 17,000? Will not. Nobody cares that 17,000. Chhagan Bhujbal, the then I think Home Minister he was at that point of time, he was prosecuted for 67,000 crore rupees scam, and bail amount was 50,000 rupees. It means what? It means a kind of Excel sheet which says that, okay, 50,000. You can't go beyond that. You can't go beyond that. So you have, I would say, it's just a mechanization, kind of mechanization of mind that will not look into the gravity, will not look into the person's status or fleeing from the jurisdiction, etc. We will just look into what kind of crime is this. Nothing beyond that. Otherwise, I have a very interesting case, Rinku versus State of UP, where a buffalo stealer was asked to pay 50,000 rupees bond. If he is going to have a 50,000, he will purchase two. Not a steal. That is the point. And this is a debate since 1980, in fact. In fact, there is a one judgment from Madhya Pradesh which reaches to Supreme Court, where at that point of time, in somewhere in 1980s, I think Moti Ram versus State of Madhya Pradesh, where the 12,000 rupees around bond was asked from a rickshaw puller, which Supreme Court, after writing 20-page judgment, reduces to 6,000 rupees. Imagine in 1980s, what is the value of 6,000 rupees? Asking this bond from a person who has just, allegedly have done some theft, a few rupees. These are the questions. That's why I'm saying it is not a question of high crime rate. It's not a question. Otherwise, Delhi should have been having higher bond rate, but they are not having higher. They are not having higher. So these are the things which need to be examined in much detail as to why. And my answer roughly at this stage is the mechanization of mind. They are not looking to the, even in the same way, the compensation issue. Even the compensation issue is also almost in the same line. 1 lakh on each, 50,000 on each, 20,000 on each. I mean, each means whichever more than one offenders are there. Not looking into whether they will be in a position to pay it or not. Because there are greater consequences of this mechanization. I can put it in a simple way. If a person is not in a position to immediately pay 50,000 rupees, even after having bail order, he will not be released. So it's not merely price tag, but it goes beyond that. It says that you have right, but you can't purchase it. You have the right, but you can't purchase. So these are the questions. That's why this is a very complicated issue. While addressing the judges, I have come across, and whenever I raise this question, I haven't got any satisfactory answer. Apart from one that a lot of burden are there, I can't look into all these cases details.
In Himachal, there is also a judiciary can mechanize of their mind to fill their bail bonds. There is one case, NDPS case, Justice Anup Chitkara. In that there is a judge Charas when it is a 1 crore, approximately 1 crore. So when judge when there is a bail, he want to file a bail for the judge says कि आप 20,000 मतलब 20,000 आप bail bond भर के
We
दे दो.
will give lot of such examples. I have given two the extreme cases, the Salman Khan's case and Chagan Bhujbal case. I mean, do these guys really going to care 50,000 or 17,000 in any case? But that is the bond. Judiciary proudly putting it as if threatening, you will lose 70,000 if you will skip the bail. Thank you, Lordship. I will not skip. Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you.